We do believe the broader you have participation in the market, the more people that can come in and innovate.
Services are changing, customer behavior is changing, traffic patterns change, and we need new things in the telecom networks at a faster pace. And to get to that interoperability with these new things, following the old standards approach is just not viable.
Using an open source development model, you can build a platform that gives you interfaces that you can sort of de facto standardize on.
Openness is crucial.
It's everybody coming together.
Openness really allows and enables a multi-vendor solution.
What service providers really need is agility to roll out new services.
Open in the sense of a lot of people building solutions only play a small role in the overall end-to-end solution. Embrace openness because it's a key ingredient to innovation, security, and tighter integration.
My name is Martyn Warwick. I'm the editor-in-chief of TelecomTV, and I'll be moderating this panel this evening. Before we begin, I would like to bring up very briefly on stage the two sponsors of today's panel. So that's Lynn Comp, Director of Market Development Network Platforms Group at Intel. Lynn, good to see you again. You're very popular. And Sarwar Raza, VP of NFV Product Management at Hewlett-Packard Enterprise. And you're popular too. Good to see you. Let me get in between you. Now, the panel discussion we're about to have is about the challenges of deploying open source into large-scale carrier networks. And before we begin, I'm going to ask the two sponsors, starting with Lynn. Why did you sponsor this? Why is it so important? What do you mean when you talk about openness in this context? Because this is going to be pretty open.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the main things to always remember when it's open is you need to also have open conversations and share BKMs, our best known methods. Sorry, that's an Intel speak. But be able to have this open confrontation or open collaboration or open conversations. It's all about moving the industry forward. And so one of the things I saw when I looked at the title as I walked in is I thought, it's very much like being in the cloud in the enterprise. Years ago, if any of you remember what it was like to have the conversation, does Linux really belong in the enterprise? Or maybe Linux belongs in some enterprises, but not in the banks. And then when you look at where Linux is today, you can see that open source and open standards really have evolved, and they have created a level of stability with agility that no one really saw coming when things like Linux were starting to deploy. And so I think it's really important as we're having these conversations in a different industry to realize that openness in discussion, openness in standards, openness in interfaces, and open source really are things that can collectively move the industry forward in a faster pace as long as we continue to have an open conversation.
Thank you. Your turn.
So, I think open means different things to different people, right? At its heart, open source is about leveraging the power of community development, right? Communities that bring together vendors, end users, academia. And what we've seen in the telecom industry over the last several years is a real urge on the part of our customers, the service providers, to move from simply using open source components, be it web servers, operating systems, to now demanding systems that are based on open source. So whether it's OpenStack or OpenStack as part of OpenNFV, or rather OPNFV, that conversation is actually getting more and more interesting every year. There's there's some debate as to whether or not OpenStack is ready. I think every year we set ourselves a challenge to sort of march up that maturity curve, and I think we're getting there. So let's hear from our panelists.
We'll see. Well, we're going to call you both back at the very end for very brief reaction shots. We've got the cameras to see what you made of it. And there we go. We're open for business. Let me introduce the panel to start with. On my left here is an old friend, Francisco Javier Ramon Salguero, Head of Virtualization at Telefonica GCTO. Francisco, welcome. On his left is Sorabh Saxena, Senior Vice President, Software Development and Engineering at AT&T. Also very welcome. His left, Chris Lewis, Industry Analyst and founder of Lewis Insight, an all-round good egg, and another old friend. And on his left, Chris Wright, Chief Technologist at Red Hat. So that's the panel, and here we go. So we're talking about, does open source stack up for service provider transformation? See what we did there? Stack up, clever, eh? Now, first question, this is to all of you, and if you don't volunteer, I'll pick on somebody. Okay, so since the inception of NFV, openness has been the mantra for the global industry. In the first instance for the carriers, and later then for the vendor ecosystem. More recently, there's been an increasing emphasis on open source in carrier networks. The big question here, I think, has to be, isn't the concept of deploying open source in carrier networks completely countercultural and technologically counterintuitive to the service provider community, and thus a negation of everything they've been doing in the development of their networks over so many years? Why is open source all of a sudden so all-fired important to service providers? And couldn't this actually, at base, be a case of, look, if it ain't broke, don't fix it? Who'd like to start?
Sure.
Go for it.
So, Martyn, firstly, open source is not a sudden realization at AT&T. Allow me to explain on that. The first point I would like to make is, if you study the traffic profile and cost economics, just to give you a little bit of statistics here, since 2007, our mobile traffic has grown 150,000%. And in the next 5 to 6 years, we anticipate 10x growth for all of our network traffic. Clearly, the ways of the old won't help with the cost economic that we need now. So obviously, we have to find newer answers. And we believe solely relying on proprietary black box approach will not do it. And we have to adopt open source approaches to help with the cost economics. That's point one. Point two is that the customers are demanding instantaneous network management and services capabilities. To support that, we know very well that closed black box approach has not worked and cannot work. The only way we can do that is a combination of open source working together with open architecture to build platforms to deliver the capabilities the customers are demanding right now. You talked about cultural transformation, so let me try to hit that squarely. AT&T has among the largest private corporation IT shops in the world. And at the center of that IT shop is software. So in the IT world itself, we've been adopting open source over the last few years already, and we're bringing that playbook to the software-defined network now. So it's a rather natural evolution from where we were. And finally, and maybe the most important point, that process and technology transformation is absolutely in our DNA. We've been around for 120 plus years, and you can't survive that long without continually transforming. So as you might have read in the recent New York Times article, that we have a skills pivot going on, and a program that's been on for up to 3 years already, and will go at least into 2020, which basically is retooling our large workforce and pivoting them towards the future. And software is at the core of it to deliver frugality, delivers agility, and delivers speed. And hence, if you tie it all together, open source is right at the middle of it all.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Go.
Yep, and I tend to agree with, we suffer all the same stuff, but I'd like to take it from a different perspective, because often the service providers will say, I'm doing this because, look, my life is so hard. I have so many things to complain about. It's not true. I mean, there are challenges as in any other industry. And actually what we need is to reinvent ourselves as any other industry, and we need to do the things to adapt it to a world that is changing in many ways. I mean, we have more data traffic for the good, because otherwise it would be, if we hadn't offered the data traffic, we wouldn't be where we are right now. So, but the thing is that we need to manage that. And I think that there are a couple of things that are the hopes that we have with open source, and then I could connect with the open source. Actually, what we want is more agility. We want to change the way that we do the things because people are demanding that we do the things faster. And to try and make mistakes. But we want that those mistakes, if we make we make 3 mistakes and a big hit, the problem is that we can afford the 3 mistakes. And that requires that we change the way that we operate the things, and the things are not plug and play, unfortunately. And in other industries, they are not plug and play, but it seems that they are easier. And actually, we've seen internally, depending on the activity, we've seen that has happened. I mean, it's not the same the things that happen in the network, that happens in the IT, that happen in the cloud. We see we are the same company, and we see that the tools that we have at our hand are different. So our hope, and here we intersect with the open source, is open source ready for the service providers? Depending on what? We have open source already for a long time. All of us, I mean, it's not a secret, but depends on the purpose and the degree of maturity for that purpose. So the challenge here is to bring that open source to the next place, that is the network itself, how we operate our core business. Not, I mean, because our wages for sure are calculated in an x86. So I can rely on that type of things. But actually, it are fit for the purpose of managing IO-intensive workloads, creating a network structure, adapted, etc., etc. Who knows? And open source is a big opportunity to get closer to that plug-and-play environment.
Thank you. Chris Wright.
So first of all, I have to agree with your comments. I mean, we're all coming at this from different perspectives, but we're going in the same direction. And what I see is we've had a great indicator of where we're going with open source on the IT side and cloud environments. We have major innovation and rapid movement from open source collaboration in places like large public clouds. And those public clouds are actually producing services that the customers of the service providers are interested in consuming. The service providers are in a unique position to have a direct relationship with those customers, and also have the challenge of providing value in the service that they're able to give to their customers in a way that's competitive to a completely different operating model that we're seeing in the clouds. And so what I believe is that we've had a great, what I would even call a gross inefficiency in this industry, which is duplication of effort. And collaboration allows us to consolidate effort on the core sort of non-differentiated components of the stack and really focus on your business purpose and add value right where it's going to make a hit on your top line. So that's where I see it.
Thank you. Now, Chris Lewis, you're dying to get in there.
Well, I think
as an industry analyst, what do you make of that?
Well, I think the end of your question about if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, it is broke.
Well, that's a good answer.
You know, so the simple fact is that and we have to move to a more software-based business in order to address what we've got today, let alone what's coming tomorrow. So if you think about IoT and 5G as 2 things coming down the line, and the complexity and the volume of traffic and the variety of traffic that's going to throw into the mix, we've got to be able to react as a business to all of those changing parameters. And I don't think we've been able. I think we can do that without the innovation of new vendors coming through and of the people at Red Hat, all this sort of environment. We've got to benefit from that ecosystem and not have that locked-in system which dictates the old engineering mentality of saying, okay, we're going to spend 12 months building it and then you might have a go at using it. So I think that it's that coming together, you mentioned quite correctly, of the network piece and the IT piece. And we still talk about those 2 things, as being separate. Whereas actually, that's the engine of the business. And I think the risk aversity of the telcos in the past, and you look at it across the world, and some have been very risk averse. I mean, I congratulate AT&T and Telefonica for grasping this particular nettle quite aggressively. But there's plenty that have sat there thinking, actually, surely something else is going to come along and save our bacon. So I think the timing is absolutely right for changing the mentality, getting that cultural change through, becoming a more software-oriented organisation,
and actually addressing what the customer needs, thinking about the customer building in rather than the inside-out engineering mentality.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. I'm going to ask each of you individually a couple of questions now. The first one's for Sorabh. In October last year, British Telecom, BT, came out and said they would not use OpenStack for virtual enterprise unless certain key issues were addressed and remedied. And among the things they were talking about were the connection of virtual network functions, service chain modification, scalability, so-called startup storms, the security of OpenStack over the internet, and backwards compatibility. And that's not all of the list. However, AT&T is building its AIC, integrated cloud, on OpenStack, and the company has said that in the near future, it intends 50% of its software to be open source. So what has the experience been like thus far, and why the very public commitment to open source on the part of AT&T when BT said, well, not for us?
The first thing I'm going to say, our past experience has told us we have to engage. We have to engage with all the rapid change taking place in the industry. And the rapid change is happening from anywhere and everywhere. So you cannot just sit on the sidelines and watch. You got to participate and engage, because we can all contribute to the direction in which the industry is changing, and does the open source communities. And let me now specifically answer some of the points around OpenStack. We've tackled it with a thoughtful, sanguine strategy with, let's say, multiple legs to the stool. One of the legs to the stool is, well, if OpenStack has certain gaps right now, which it does, because it's a work in progress, and it's true iterative, agile approach to the community-based development. We work with other open source projects or disruptor technologies. As an example, SDN Local Controller is helping us with the layer 3 service chaining. One example. The other is we bring to bear AT&T's technology and innovation wherewithal. And we have come up with a distributed cloud architecture with local control, yet central management. That's what, and with few other innovations added to it, that's what helped us build out 74 cloud locations in 1 year, with providing the resiliency and reliability on top of it, on top of the scalability. But the third and maybe the most important point and most relevant to this conversation is the fact that we are contributing to OpenStack, and we are contributing to other open source communities. If you do not participate, if we service providers do not participate, as OpenStack historically has been driven by vendors. So we cannot sit on the sidelines and complain that it's not meeting our needs. It's a very simple thing. Participate, influence, drive it. So we actually invite all the other service providers and large enterprises to bring their needs to the community and drive the direction of the community. This is one of those cases where more the merrier, quite candidly. And we would like to bring everybody to openly collaborate and drive the industry much faster. More of us, the faster we can get to our common end goal.
Thank you. Got through it, well done.
Yeah. Small comment here. First that I fully agree with your approach. You need to get engaged. You can just complain. So you need to identify what does not work for your use cases and try to do something about it, not just complain. But actually, I think that this is quite compatible with the approach taken by British Telecom as well. It's just to, to put the things clear, because otherwise we'll need a new panelist to explain that. The thing is that they took it seriously. Said, look, I have this use case, and for this use case, if these 4, 5, 6 gaps are solved, I buy it. So actually, this is the way that we need to take the technology. It's not that a religious choice, but as something that is technology, after all. It is a tool for a purpose. And say, look, I have some priorities in some use cases. I need to evaluate it, take it seriously, not say, look, this is not for me. Okay, let's observe it, let's see what it is. And actually, they took some action.
Absolutely.
In a manner that they socialize their concerns. They did not say, this is not good enough. They say, well, it's almost there, but there are 5 or 6 concerns. I don't remember the number. So, it's both approaches are compatible and might happen in the same service providers.
They absolutely help the industry by highlighting the issues. The point is, there's approaches to take. There's different ways to get to the answer. And OpenStack by itself, in our opinion, is not yet the only answer. So you have to supplement and complement it. And that's where the architecture and the approach to bring in other open source communities comes into play.
Yeah,
Thank
fully
you.
agree.
Francisco, I want to stay with you because this is your question. It's almost a year ago now since Telefonica released the Open Mano stack. What have you learned over that period? Has it been successful? And what have been the benefits and also the pitfalls? And in light of that experience, do you remain yourself, Telefonica remain itself committed to the open source approach?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it comes with in the right day where we are announcing that we are joining to a new open source community around Mano, where it's one of the initial seeds of code is Open Mano, among others. So they're teaming up to do something better and in a community. So definitely, yes. I mean, we've seen a lot of value. We saw in the experience, we had some objectives that we met very early, actually. And we saw that they had a lot of potential to create a community, creating certainty around what we wanted. And the thing is that if instead of being a loop for testing, we make it a framework for orchestration of NFV, that we can build together with others, so that we can see exactly those gaps. It's connected. Okay, let's engage the service providers. Let's put over the table the kind of use cases that are a priority for us, that for sure it will be different. But let's see what are the things that can help us to improve, iterate quickly, and create something that is valuable for the industry. And that's exactly the objective. So yes, we are more committed than ever.
I thought you'd say that.
You guessed it.
I do. I get it. Thank you. This one is for Chris Wright. Chris, as a supplier of carrier-grade open source solutions yourself, how do vendors such as Red Hat address the concerns that BT so publicly registered, as we've been just talking just now? And how do you go about allaying the fears that carriers and other service providers evidently have in regard to some parts of open source? Furthermore, do you believe the role of the vendor to be in the implementation of open source solutions? For example, tier 1 carriers might be quite capable of doing it themselves, but tier 2s and tier 3s may not.
First of all, I do want to address those specific issues, not directly case by case, but the concept. And sure. It is absolutely about direct engagement. And what we do as a vendor is we work together with our customers and partners to bring forth the use cases that identify functional gaps in the software stack that we're building and collaborating with the external communities to build, to fill and make feature complete this software stack. And so what we've seen is, in fact, we went and spoke with BT and heard about this specific use case, which I would actually want to stress is one very unique and specific use case. And I would also say in that particular use case, your earlier question to Sorabh was something about, does this mean not choosing open source? And I think that's a bit of a false dichotomy. I think it's a question about a particular technology stack for a particular use case, not does open source work in general. Now, how do we address carrier grade type features and functionality for the telco service provider community? It's a great question. It's one that we've been working on in the Linux world for quite some time now. There was an initiative starting back almost 10 years focused on bringing specific features to Linux itself. And while that has sort of faded, it's not a prominent part of the industry anymore, the concepts are still the same. And what's really important is getting direct engagement with the community so that we're building software that meets the needs of the carriers. And what we can show is from our own experience in other industries, we're already running mission critical businesses all over the place. The stock exchanges worldwide are powered typically by Linux. So air traffic control systems powered by Linux. These are really life and death and very financially sensitive markets. So I think it's reasonable to extrapolate that we have all of the skills, and what we need is the understanding to get clarity on the use cases and the functional gaps. So hopefully that captures most of your question.
Good answer. Really was. Thank you. Chris Lewis, shorter question for you.
Good.
As an independent analyst, what do you make of the debate overall? Not this one necessarily, but the entire debate across the industry. What are you hearing from your telco and vendor clients in terms of their approach to open and open source? And what advice do you give them?
What a fine, maybe a short question, but it's quite a pertinent one. I think what I'm hearing, and just listen to the other panelists talk, actually the word community comes up a lot. We talk about the vendor community and the ecosystem of suppliers. And I think in many respects, I don't think the telcos have played as part of a community in the past. And even more so than that, you're touching upon the services that telcos are going to offer in the future. It's not a telco industry anymore. You know, it's almost like the more sophistication we see in the stock exchange or in other businesses, it's much more about the digitization of the business. And what I talk to them about is making sure that we get these barriers down between the internal silos of network and IT, and make sure we can actually benefit from the software advantages that come to bear now. And that, frankly, in terms of the relationship with their key vendors, that they have an open mind. Because openness is not something you would normally assign to a telco label, would you? So I think what I'm often saying to them is, you've got to have a more open mind. You need to adjust your business model. You've got to transform the way you do business, as we said in the first question. And frankly, the vendors who can bring that innovation to your table, and yes, it's going to be a much more risky approach than in the past, and it's not going to have been tested to the nth degree for 18 months in the labs before you release everything. But actually, we need to get services out there. We need to adjust and get in with that investment cycle and life cycle of the way the customers want to work and not the way telcos would like to work in an ideal world. The ideal telco world is gone, and the world that the telcos are now playing in absolutely necessitates that they become part of a community, both in terms of the suppliers they work with, but also reaching out and the services that extend out to all the customers.
If I may just add to that, I think it's a great answer, Chris, and it's an ideal new world in a way, because the technologies have advanced. To your point, with continuous integration, continuous deployment, microservices, containers, you don't necessarily need to test to the nth degree, because you can deploy one service to a friendly customer, see how it works, scale it up, or tear that one down. So the technology has advanced enough that we need to truly make use of the whole ecosystem of technology. Yeah. To your point, we have worked hard on breaking the network IT barrier, as I was alluding to earlier. In fact, we have done organizational changes on that, and there's no longer a network and IT, it's technology organizations. So very much agree with you.
And I think it also comes down to the issue of, you know, the telcos, in a sense, have released things when they want to, you know, and then they always ask for permission, whereas the more open digital world asks for forgiveness. And I think there's actually, if you try new things and you're seen to be trying to improve everyone's position, you get forgiveness. Try it.
We actually talked earlier about engaging with communities. This is just a different form of engagement. This is engaging with your user community and getting very direct feedback to understand, are you demonstrating new business value to your users or not? Mm-hmm. And you can't do that if your whole view in life is time-consuming, resource-consuming, and at the end of the day, you may have built something and they don't come. It just doesn't, the economics don't work out.
And I guess it's the old idea that, you know, I guess when certainly I started in the industry, it was all about the guys in white coats, and it's not that. It's guys in T-shirts and chinos now. You know, you've just got to get down there with the kids, you know. So.
I wanted to add something. I mean, actually the open source is a tool for a purpose. And so I'd like to define actually the two expectations and when and when not apply. So I mean, we need to balance how brave we are with the risk that we are assuming, and we need to do that all the time. So actually, one thing that we're trying. One of our expectations is to create a healthier ecosystem, so that you can have some better chances that someone who comes with a good idea can enter with not much effort. So it's about lowering barriers, and not always is easy. The second piece is how we change our process. However, it doesn't mean that depending on the use case, and again, it's something that you need to consider case by case. It doesn't mean that you can apply one by one, and I'm certain that you know that pretty well. The techniques that you know from other industries. I mean, you need to adapt them and learn from them and iterate. And you need to do it in a way that still is risky, but it's not that risky that someone might complain. And someone might say, that's because you put open source code there, or any other technology, by the way. You put it a 5G core, or you put whatever technology. Okay? It could say it in the 4G, it could say the 3G. I mean, so you need to balance the risk and do that transformation in a clever manner. And here the point is not whether open source can be up to the job. Of course it will. The thing is when and for which purpose. And decide what is the route that takes you from minimizing the risks and at the same time getting to the end as fast as possible. And that is the trade-off that we have continuously in any transformation, including this one with the open source.
Healthy tension.
Yep.
Let's move on because we're running out of time. And I want, again, a smallish question between the lot of you, and then we'll call our sponsors back up to say the final word. We've talked about OpenStack, it's been mentioned many times. What about the other initiatives that are out there? There's OPNFV, there's Open Daylight, there's ONOS, there's ONF, and there are many of them. Do you think it's getting to the stage where it could actually be said that there are too many? Who'd like to take that?
I take that. I'll add an extra acronym, Open Source Mano.
Indeed, indeed, we mentioned it.
Yeah, in fact, so if the question is, there are too many, it depends on for what. So I mean, if there are too many acronyms, of course. I mean, in any aspect of technologies, we have too many acronyms, and perhaps we don't see where the pieces fit. So the question is not how many acronyms fits inside my mobile phone. The thing is, if it works or not, and if we have all the pieces that I need to create an awesome service. That is the point. And you have several pieces. The pieces that you have mentioned are complementary, most of them. Besides the controllers that are mainly competing, and I like that, by the way. But no, let's embrace the diversity. Actually, if you're embracing the diversity, let's embrace the diversity and see which one wins and which one does the things better. So the thing is that these pieces that you are mentioning, I know that it require a lot of architectural view all the time. So this progress means that this will change, and that you need to track all the changes. But actually, each of them, if you focus on what they do well, they fit to a purpose, and that purpose has a fit in the architecture. So my perception is that no, they are good, they are healthy, and they are addressing different topics. So I'm happy to see it as a final consumers of those technologies.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anything to say?
There are thousands of open source projects.
Indeed.
And I think exactly what Javier was saying is, as long as we're really focused within a project on delivering something, and it's clear what we're building and what we're delivering out of that project, and how to engage with that project, we're not creating projects just for fun. There's real work happening, and they serve different purposes. So as some concrete examples, OPNFV is a very different style from some of the other projects. And it's about delivering integrated functionality across a collection of projects, which you can't do in each of the individual projects. And then, of course, we need each of the individual projects because they fit a key part in this technology stack. So at some point, we do have to ask ourselves, are we creating too many projects that are duplicating themselves and there's not a lot of value there? And I don't see that we're at that point in the industry. We need some innovation, we need some competition to breed the innovation, and we need to understand just what each of these projects, the purpose are. And
I'd like to just add to that. I think, Chris, you made a great point. Firstly, just an observation. I think after the first round of wetting, so to speak, of separating the grain from the chaff, the wheat from the chaff, if after that round, I bet you there'll be less open source communities than the number of vendors and the number of vendors' products that we had in the past. So it's just a relative comparison. I think we'll be better off. Will be my firm answer to that. Secondly, I think OpenNFV, to piggyback on your point, Chris, I absolutely agree. The approach is already prescient in the sense that, to address your question, it's an umbrella approach for OpenNFV, so that all the service providers and other vendors included could provide a unified set of requirements that we can upstream to the multiple open source communities that you need, because there's so much to be done to go from domain 1 to domain 2.0. There's so much to be done, but the OpenNFV is one prescient approach to try to organize the input back into the various other communities that will still be needed. So that would be my add-on to some of the other good answers here.
I am going to call upon our two sponsors, Lynn Comp, excuse me, from Intel, and Sawa Raza from Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, just to come up and just say a few final words, if you wouldn't mind.
Very crisply.
Very crisply.
Very crisply.
Moderately crisply.
Moderately crisply.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So as I was listening to the panelists, it was interesting. I was having flashbacks of two different conversations I had with two different service providers. One of them was right after the data tsunami became clear it was not going to go away. And they just said, our statistical models have worked for 50 years and none of them work now. And one of the lessons in that is that at this pace of change, at this rate of innovation, it really does take a community of people having to innovate as quickly as possible. It changes your methods, it changes your approach to be able to keep up with and even add value and services in that environment. And then one of the other points about do you have too many open source projects? I recently had a service provider say, why is Intel participating in so many open source projects? There's way too many open source projects. Why don't you just pick 5? And, and my response was, well, first, we don't operate a network, and you do. So what are you doing to actually participate and engage the community? And are you actually contributing either through the British Telecom paper saying here's the holes, or through AT&T and Telefonica contributing their methods or their code? And so this is an open invitation that if it looks like it's not necessarily gelling in the direction that you think is going to address your needs, jump in. This is open source, and it is a community, and it is something that we need you to contribute to.
Most panels I've been on, or most panels that I watch, I get fairly frustrated when I see everyone sort of violently agreeing with each other, right? Here I actually heard a lot of that, but we got a lot of substance behind it, right? And I really want to thank our panelists. I want to touch upon a couple of points that were made by some of our panelists. Chris talked about there's too much duplication, and open source is actually a means of introducing efficiency, right? So we're engineers, or trained as engineers, and we like to think like that, and it's great to not have duplicative effort, duplicative code. I hear Sorabh and his team, and he's got access to an army of exceptionally talented technologists, right? Well, an army that anybody else would envy.
I wouldn't think I have an army.
Well,
and don't tell my boss.
But the point I'm making though is, other service providers, other enterprises would love to have a fraction of the capability and the expertise and the experience that someone like AT&T or Telefonica has, right? And the truth is, it's not easy to replicate that. That's what vendors can do. I know you have some frustrations with vendors of past, but...
See, what we say is we all meet in the community.
Yeah,
so we're going to contribute to the community.
Yeah.
You can too.
Yeah.
And that's where I think anybody who has got intellectual property to contribute contributes.
Absolutely. And so I guess my parting thought is, you can rely on a vendor community or vendors that are committed to open source and open source projects to help curate and mature these solutions and provide them, scale them out, right? We can work with the AT&Ts of the world, we can work with the Telefonicas of the world, we can work with tier 2s and tier 3s and really bring those technologies and those frameworks to the masses, right? And not everyone is going to be able to consume it the way the large guys are, right? That's where vendors help. So thank you again. I think we've all learned a lot here. Martyn.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to say we've reached the end of our really quite exciting panel, a little bit in the middle, but very enjoyable. It really was. We call these things super panels, and that was, by any definition, a super panels.